Amy from the Paul Sawyer Public Library, and today we're going to be making babka. Babka is an Eastern European chocolate bread. Think of it as a little bit like cinnamon rolls, except it is actually in a bread dough form. It's absolutely delicious. It is one of my favorite things to bake. I have already started the process just a little bit. I have mixed together some warm milk with yeast. Since this is a bread, we will be needing yeast. And then I have mixed my dry ingredients together. This is flour, sugar, and just a little bit of salt. If you prefer to bake by weight, I will include the weight measurements in grams for those who would like that. So that'll be available as well as volumetric measurements. And then I have our 1 egg and our 1 egg yolk ready to go in. And that is where we are. As a note, this recipe, it is going to be pretty important to have some sort of stand mixer to work with. Sorry, I have dogs. I'm baking at home and they get excited. So if you hear any barks in the background, that is them. I apologize. But it will be pretty important to have some sort of stand mixer to make this. Just because it's an enriched dough, it's going to be a lot stickier to work with than a traditional bread dough. And so you're not going to be able to knead it the same way. And so using a dough hook on a stand mixer will give you that same process. If you don't have a stand mixer, mix it by hand in a bowl, but don't use your actual hands. Use some sort of spatula or spoon. And what you'll be looking for when you mix it by hand is it's not going to pass the window pane test, which is where you pick a little bit of it up, stretch it out, and it kind of gets thin like a window pane. But it will start to have a little bit of thinness and a little bit more filminess to it when you do try and pass the pane, when you do try and create the pane test. So you will be doing a lot of hand mixing in that case, just to develop the gluten and give it a nice stretchiness and a nice lightness. But definitely encourage some sort of stand mixer. I love mine. It is one of my best friends. If you have a stand mixer and you have trouble with it reaching the bits in the very bottom of your bowl, and you always seem to have this little pocket of dough that's mixed or isn't half mixed or isn't mixed at all, look online for something called the dime calibration test, and it will help you recalibrate the little bits in your mixer that help the head tilt most sufficiently get everything in the bottom of your mixer. I had that happen. I've had my mixer for well over a decade. I've used it so much that the calibration of it just got off. And that's going to be especially important when you're making breads and using your dough hook. It doesn't scrape down the sides in the same way that your regular scraping attachment would. So let's get down to business. We're going to catch our dough hook into our bowl. And what I already have here, as I said, is a mixture of warm milk and my yeast. I'm going to add to that 1 whole egg and 1 egg yolk. I'm just going to toss that in. And I have my dry goods mixture. It's my flour, my sugar, and just a little bit of salt. And we're going to sprinkle that over top. And the next step of this process, it is going to be several minutes of mixing, so I'm going to fill you in on that. You're going to mix it on low for about 2 minutes just to get everything incorporated. And once it's all well and incorporated, scrape down the sides of the bowl. Make sure it's incorporated. If there's anything on the sides that isn't well incorporated, go ahead and do that. And then we're going to mix it at medium speed for about 5 minutes. And what that is going to do is start to get the gluten developed, start to get the bread stretchy, that kind of thing. And so let's get the rest of this dumped in here, kind of sprinkle it over, make sure it's even through the entire bowl. And so now what I'm going to do is we're going to get this mixing, and I will see you back in just a couple of minutes for our next step. I've mixed my dough so it's all incorporated for about 2 minutes, and then we've worked it on medium speed for about 5 minutes, and it's just starting to get stretchy and sticky. And now we're going to add the butter, and that is going to create a much more slack kind of dough, but that's okay. That's what we want. And so we're going to add all of the butter all at once. It's 1 whole stick of unsalted butter plus another 2 tablespoons, so a total of 10 tablespoons of butter. Once we have added this, we are going to mix it again for another 3 minutes on medium speed, until it's all incorporated, and it'll start to get kind of silky and sticky. Once we've done that, we're going to let it rest and rise for about an hour. So I'm going to mix it, I'm going to let it rest and rise, and then we'll see you back here in just about an hour. Hello everyone, we're back. Our dough has had the chance to rise, and it has gotten a little bit of air in it, but it's not going to get a ton. Since this is an enriched dough, it's not going to see the same rise that you would see with a typical bread dough that is really just flour, water, yeast, and salt. So our next step is going to be actually spreading this out on a baking sheet that has either had parchment paper or some sort of silicone baking mat on it. And then we're also going to spray that with cooking spray to make sure it doesn't stick. So spray that down real quick. And then I'm gonna twist this out of my mixer. I always forget which direction. There we go. And we're going to spread this out as evenly as we can across the surface of our cookie sheet. And you will still have some of this that kind of sticks to the bowl. That's okay. Let's just try and get as much out as we can. The last little bits, and we are going to scrape it all in, and we are going to slice this in half now, just so that when we do take it out, it's going to be easier to work with. So let's spread this out. If you have trouble spreading it, you may want to also spray a little bit of cooking spray on your spatula just to keep it easier to work with, especially if it's sticking to the spatula as well. I'm not having a ton of issues with that, but it's also just kind of sticking, and that's okay too. It'll take time, it'll slacken, and it will eventually spread out. So let's get this as evenly spread out as we can. Your real goal is to try and spread it out, but also try and have the dough as close to even portions as you can. So that's what I'm trying to do here. And that is pretty evenly spread across this surface, as you can see. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to do my best to kind of just slice it down the middle, and it slices pretty evenly, easily, even with my little spatula. And so I have sliced it, and we have two roughly even halves. If your two halves do not look approximately even, then now is the time to make adjustments. So I'm going to take a look at my two halves quickly. I do feel like they're pretty close to even. So what we're going to do now is, if you have a baking bag, I don't think these are actually baking bags. I always find these around Thanksgiving because people, I think, will brine their turkeys in them. They're very large bags. And they do not have a seal on them. But they're also great for holding baked goods that need room, not baked goods, things that you're going to bake that need room to rise or that need covered in your fridge, which is this option. This perfectly holds all of this cookie sheet. If you don't have access to one of these or you can't find it, that's okay. You can also just cover the whole tray in plastic wrap. That's just fine. Just make sure it's covered pretty well and generally pretty airtight, because this is going to go into the fridge overnight. And tomorrow we are going to take this out of the fridge and we are going to continue the baking process. So So tomorrow what we're going to do is take this out of the fridge, we're going to make our filling, and we're actually going to make our 2 loaves of babka. So I will see you back here tomorrow to finish up baking. Bye everyone. Good morning everyone, and we are back to make the filling for our babka. Our babka dough is still in the fridge and we want to leave it there until we're ready to roll it out. But right now we are going to focus on our filling. Our filling is going to comprise 2 types of chocolate, milk chocolate and bittersweet chocolate, as well as butter, honey, and crushed up chocolate wafer cookies such as graham crackers, or probably even sandwich cookies, but it does just call for the wafer cookies themselves. So a graham cracker cookie would work really well, but make sure it's chocolate, not a cinnamon or a vanilla. What I have here is a double boiler that I am melting both types of chocolate in, as well as butter. As far as the double boiler goes, I'm going to give you a couple of tips that I have accumulated over my years of melting chocolate and tempering chocolate and things like that. We don't need to worry about tempering in this case. We really just need to melt it since we're adding other things to it. But what I have here is I have my pot, and then I have my water, and in my pot of water I have a large trivet that has the bowl with the chocolate in it sitting just above the water. You don't want your second pot that has your chocolate in it actually sitting in the water. That's going to mean the bottom of the pot is hotter and it's possibly going to scorch the chocolate and make it burn. So you really just want to have your water slightly below the top of your trivet, and that's going to create even heat. And it's really going to use the steam from just not quite boiling water to help it melt. So I would definitely recommend getting some sort of trivet that's going to help it sit just above. On top of that, I also have a metal sling that's going to help me lift it out quickly when it's done. And you can see that it's just above like this. If you do not have a metal sling, I would also recommend using a piece of tin foil and kind of creating the same sort of thing. Just take a piece of tin foil, fold it up really long, and then you can sit it underneath and you can use it to lift it out. Make sure you test it when it's cold. Don't try to test this out when it's hot, because if it doesn't work, you'll want to troubleshoot it again while it's all still cold. Trying things for the first time while you're working with hot chocolate is not a great idea. So what we're going to do is I'm going to let my chocolates melt along with my butter. Once it's melted and at room temperature, don't add the remainder of it when it's still hot. We're going to let it cool to room temperature. We're going to add our chocolate sandwich cookies that we have crushed up and just a little bit of honey. Once we have added both of those things, let's really let it cool so it's nice and easy to work with and it's not hot. And at that point, we will be back here and we're going to roll out our babka dough, add our filling to it, and really get it to the point where it's going to look like that bread, at least unbaked, that we are going to be putting into the oven. So it is baking day. We are moving right along. We're going to have our filling melted soon, and I will see you back in just a bit to assemble our babkas. Hi everyone, we are back and it's time to roll out, assemble our babkas. So let's go ahead and do that. What I have in front of me is my babka dough, one piece. But before we actually put our babka into our pan, we do need to take care of our pan itself. And it's just sitting off stage, so I'm going to grab that. My pan is just a little bit wider, but that's okay. It'll grow, it's fine. So what we're going to do is we're going to spray our pan down with just a little bit of cooking spray. Thank you. And I have also taken parchment and I have cut it to pan shape. And you'll see it's not quite across. It's thinner at certain ends, wider at others. The thin ends are going to go with the long ends. The wide ends are going to go with the wider ends of the pan. And so what we're going to do is fold these, and that's going to help it fit into the loaf pan a little bit better. So we're going to quickly do that. And it's still going to be a little bit of a squish, but we're going to push this into our loaf pan. Okay. And the fact that we have cooking spray in here will help it stick a little bit better. And you can see my parchment does stick out past the edges of the pan. That's what we want. When this is done baking, we'll be able to use the extra pieces of parchment that are hanging out over the edges to lift it out and help it stay tidy. So that is ready to go for our loaf. What we're going to do now is we're going to roll this out to approximately, and I forget, 16 inches square. So we're going to start that now. I have a measuring tape handy. I suggest you have one as well. Oh, I forgot to flour the top just a little bit. There we go. And try to keep this as close to a square all throughout as you can. Okay, let's give it a measure. Good that way, and a little more long ways. Perfect. Now, we are going to apply 1/2 cup filling to the inside of our babka. I am going to tell you, this is rather thick, and I actually would say just use your hand. Take and smear a little bit in this corner, a little bit here, a little bit there, and spread it out as nicely as you can. That was a 1/4 measuring cup. I'm going to get a second 1/4 cup. I'm pretty much just scooping this out with my hands and spreading it around in little dollops. If you are unable to spread this evenly across the entire surface, that's okay. It's really thick. If you tear the babka dough a little, that's okay. I would just say try to refrain from making huge tears in your dough. So let's spread this out as nicely as we can, trying to leave about a 1/2 inch, 1/4 inch around the edges. There we go. Spread it a little bit more that way. And I do have more filling than I'm going to need. I'm going to use it because the filling is lovely. And why waste it? We do still need a little bit for the outside of this babka. So let's make sure we still have some left. But we really only need a little bit to coat the outside. And I think that's nice. Nice and lovely filled. All right. There we go. We are going to roll this as nicely and tightly as we can. One of the beautiful things about babka is the lovely spirals it makes once it's baked because of the chocolate in the dough. And this is what makes me think of it as similar to a cinnamon roll. So let's get that last little bit of filling in. And then roll it back to the middle of our baking area. Last thing that we're going to need this for, yet again, is we should cut it approximately in half. And this has gotten a little bit longer. It's almost 20 inches. So let's cut it in half, right at about 10, right here. And we are yet again going to use more of the babka filling and coat 1/2 of this, one of these pieces with more filling. And this is going to, again, create a really beautiful design on the outside. And I am going to move my pan just a little bit out of the way so you can see what I'm going to do here. So what we're going to do, get that nice and coated on there. What I'm going to do is put the 2 pieces beside each other, place one piece on top, and then twist the other piece around it. It's not going to twist super tightly, but it's going to create a little bit of a spiral. And then we're going to place the 2 pieces in the pan together, keeping the parchment separate. And then we are going to cover this and let it rise. Let me double check how long. For 2 hours. It should start to rise about doubling in size. If it doesn't, it's okay. Let it rise as much as it will. And in 2 hours, I'll see you back here. Bye, everyone. Hi, everyone. It's time to bake. I have preheated my oven to 375 degrees, and both of my babkas are going to go into the oven for approximately 45 minutes. So let's take care of that now to start. All right, so I'm gonna set a timer of 45 minutes. All right, those are going to bake for 45 minutes. In the meantime, we do need to make our chocolate glaze. We are yet again going to be using a double boiler method for this, just as we did before. I have a trivet in the bottom and a sling, and we are melting our chocolate. This time it is 12 ounces of bittersweet chocolate, 4 ounces of milk chocolate, plus another stick and a half of butter. We're going to melt all of this together, and then we're going to add just a little bit of corn syrup to it. Once that's melted, we'll be all set. We'll let it wait until our babkas are done and just a little bit cool, and then we'll be back and we'll finish up our babkas. So I'll see you in just a bit. Hi everyone, we're back. Our babkas are out of the oven and our glaze is made. So we are going to now take our babkas out of their loaf pans, and easy peasy, they are out of their loaf pans. They didn't really stick at all because we both greased them and used the parchment paper. They're still kind of warm, but the pans aren't too hot. And we're also going to remove these babkas from their parchment. And we're going to see if we can go ahead and glaze them now. I'm going to try and glaze one. And if it's just a little too hot, it'll drip off and we'll wait a little longer. But I'm going to try because it does say to glaze it kind of warm. Let's still be kind of delicate with these because as they are spiraled bread, they will start to come apart, especially since they're still a little warm. I'm going to sit that one out of the way. Slide this over into the middle. There we go. Now, what I have here is I have my baking rack, a cooling rack, over my sheet pan that I previously used to put my dough on. And we're going to leave them like this so that when we glaze these, we can just clean up the mess on the sheet pan and we don't have a huge mess all over our countertop. So let's go ahead, start glazing these and see what it looks like. The glaze has set a little bit, but it's still very, very melty and soft. So let's just see what happens. And I'm just going to start spreading this across and see if it melts off. It doesn't look like it's melting off, but it has a really nice sheen to it. I don't actually think I'm going to end up using all of this glaze because this is just such a rich dessert to begin with. If you use all of this, I think it might just be a little too much. But let's just get a nice layer of glaze over these. And once these are entirely glazed and the loaf is generally cool, go ahead and cut into them. But I definitely would wait until the glaze is set and the loaves are mostly cooled. I think generally the purpose of having so much glaze is to have enough excess to drip over the edges. And there you have 2 beautifully glazed babkas for your holiday table. I really hope you enjoyed baking with me, and I hope your babkas turn out wonderfully. Happy holidays. Bye-bye.